Cookup. Hey, you, right there. Y'all see it. Watch this video to the end, boy. Dennis here back with another movie review. Y'all already know what the lick read. Make sure y'all like and subscribe and hit that notification button. It's greatly appreciated. I haven't hit y'all with another movie review in a minute. I told y'all as promised I would do just that. But before I get into this video, y'all see the title. Y'all probably read the description for those of you that have. Before I get into the topic at hand, I just want to first and foremost say thanks everybody for the positive feedback. Thanks everybody that watched the recent video that I just dropped on my documentary, 3 Feet No Pressure. Now y'all know we've been wrestling with this throughout the year so far. If y'all OGs, y'all know I talk about it from time to time, release music and everything like that. So finally, I get a chance to talk about how all of this came about. But it's so long that you can't just put it in one short, condensed version of it. So we broke it down in parts. So make sure y'all go check out episode 1 of 3 Feet No Pressure, which is one of the many new things that we're dropping in 2025, amongst other things. But y'all just gotta just lock in, stay with me. About to get a little bit different, so just stay with me. So let's get to the topic at hand, man. No long talking. Tonight we'll be reviewing Luther, Never Too Much, the Luther Vandross documentary. Now this has been a documentary that I guess that's been in the works for quite some time. I had really no expectations going into it because obviously, you know, you want to hear about the untold, you want to hear about the man, the myth behind the curtain, if you will. And I think they did a pretty dope job with this documentary. After watching it, it was pretty dope. Obviously, what is there not to know about Luther Vandross? Now, I know a lot of people that probably a little bit much older than me. Y'all can say y'all lived it, had the chance to kind of frequent some shows or anything like that. Cool, but for me, I was born in '83, first of all. This was something a little bit different. Everybody, obviously, we grew up in a house full of Luther fans. We all grew up on Luther, no matter what your age bracket is, especially if you grew up in the 80s and 90s especially. So a lot of us was probably made off Luther, not for nothing. Anyway, the man with the velvet voice. I got a chance to do a little bit of homework and due diligence on this matter, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna give out every detail that's in the documentary that you don't know already. So what I decided to do tonight is kind of speak from my perspective like I always do, you know what I mean? Now, I'm not no movie critic or nothing like that, but first and foremost, it was a documentary. So you got his closest friends and family that's left, and everybody spoke very highly of him and kind of let us in, kind of turned the curtain back a little bit, got a chance to see the origin of Luther Vandross. So the one thing I was fascinated by the most is I like to hear about the early stages, you know what I mean? So for everything we read, everything we've seen, and this is, again, this is not giving out the documentary. I encourage you guys to go watch it if you haven't watched it yet. Very dope watch. Make sure y'all go check it out if you haven't yet. So y'all know I don't like to talk about everything that has to be a trending topic, but I could say me watching this documentary was right on time because it haven't really been that long since they released this documentary. So you got a chance to get their perspectives and you got to hear a lot in his own words as well. So for that, pretty dope. So obviously you addressed some controversies throughout the years, a lot of speculations, a lot of things that happened when I was probably 3 years old. Like they talk about a lot of tragedy to triumph, so to speak. So we're not gonna really touch on that right now. Obviously, we're not gonna talk about no sexual orientation and none of that stuff. That's for the peanut gallery to decide. I mean, for me personally, I can care less. The guy made great music. I mean, a lot of us listen to a lot of people that's in the alphabet community, so to speak, and he made great music. Shouts out to George Michael. Shouts out to Sylvester. You know, and the list goes on and on. So music has no sexual orientation if it's dope. So getting back to that. So let's just address that quickly. So it's not going to be one of them videos. Let's get into some of the things that I thought that was pretty dope. For me, I like to consider myself somewhat of a historian because I do listen to a lot of genres of music. I listen to stuff that's before my time a lot. I'm somewhat, in my mind, I'm somewhat of a historian. So when I learn certain things, I like to share with my friends all the time or share with people that grew there and grew up in those eras or ask questions, and sometimes more than less. They're like, dang, you know that? Or I ain't know that. And they was in the era. But anyway, hopefully y'all seen my vlog on Quincy Jones, which ended up being a This Is Not a Podcast. So this one I decided to switch it up. Instead of making this a This Is Not a Podcast, this is more of a movie review, and you get a little bit of a story time, if you will. My whole perspective on everything as I learned about this documentary. So it allowed me to, you know, do my notes, do some research. So I decided to share some cool stuff with you guys. One thing I noticed, he was nominated for a Grammy 33 times not before he got his first Grammy, but just to be nominated 33 times for a Grammy is insane to me. That is awesome. And out of the 33 times, he won 8 Grammys. That's a, you know what I mean? So did he get looked over for a lot of those Grammys around that time? Based off watching the documentary, I would say so. I think he should have a little bit more than 8 Grammys if we were being fair, but what award show is created equal these days, or even back then, huh? Politics as usual. So he had to deal with a lot of racism, discrimination, if you will, because, you know, at those times, that whole colorblind thing, the color line was kind of a taboo back then. The person of fair skin got the most looks. If you was in shape, if you was a heavy set person, you didn't get a lot of those looks. I don't want to give too much away of the documentary, but that's one thing I did learn. So during those times, what he wanted, like most artists, was a little bit different. Now he went all in with the singing. Let's talk about his journey. This is just certain things that just stood out to me. So one thing I learned, that he was in a lot of singing groups, and he was pretty much one of the best, if not the most go-to background vocalists. You don't really hear that too much. Now this is a dynamic voice. He outsung the actual lead singers. He worked with people from the likes of David Bowie, Barbra Streisand. Let me rewind that one more time. Donny Hathaway, Roberta Flack, Shaka Khan, Diana Ross, David Bowie, Bette Midler. That's crazy. And the list goes on and on. At that time, especially in the 70s, he was the go-to background vocalist. If any one of his friends got gigs, they gonna bring Luther. Matter of fact, he was in a group called Luther. Now, I'm a youngster, so a lot of this stuff is pretty new to me, but if you grew up in that time, disregard this. But this is just my take on it. This is me discovering America, so to speak, and I like to hear about the untold from my standpoint. Like I said, I'm an 80s baby, so deal with it. He had a singing group named after him, and it wasn't his idea. It wasn't like he was an egomaniac. It was actually the producers and everybody behind the scenes decided that they would go with just simply naming the group Luther. And not only that, we know about change. Like one of my favorite songs ever, Luther songs, and if you want to call it his song, he sung it. He didn't write it, but he sung it, and that was Go of Love. It was a Euro group that, you know, back then, you know, during the disco era, a lot of musicians always came with these groups and everything, and he was so much of a dynamic that they actually made him lead vocalist for 2 of the songs on that album, which ended up going gold, by the way. That's something I already knew already. Like, we know the song Searching and Glow of Love. But then fast forward to his debut album, solo album, which was Never Too Much, which came out in 1981. Now, again, I was born in 1983. Backstory, just my own little personal story. This ain't got nothing to do with the doc. I'm just talking about me now. Never Too Much, I actually saw the vinyl. My grandmother had this crazy vinyl collection, and as a kid, I was fascinated with the album covers, and I would often read, you know, the credits, and I was always fascinated with how the cover art was, and down to how many times I can read the same name over and over again, which I talk about these things and probably in another vlog, or I might even may or may not talk about in the documentary, who knows. But Never Too Much was the first Luther cover I ever seen, you know what I'm saying? But you could say it was pretty iconic. And then on the flip side, around that time, it's the 80s, so cassette tapes was out then too, so I actually seen the cassette tape. My pops had the cassette tape. From there, you know, you would always see Luther Vandross videos. He stayed on the radio, obviously urban radio. Shouts out to GCI V103 and so forth, all the radio stations of that time. So Luther stayed in rotation. We was very familiar with Luther Vandross. How can you not? He's one of the most recognizable voices ever. So, and at the time, I was a big fan of Eddie Murphy Delirious, and he cracked the Kentucky Fried Chicken joke, which, by the way, he also made a career of being a person that wrote jingles. Now, I knew he wrote jingles and sung jingles, but I didn't know with this documentary, they got in depth with everything, that whether they confirmed some stuff or you learned something along the way. Because he came from very humble beginnings. He grew up in the Bronx, which I knew, or, you know, I knew he grew up in the Bronx. A lot of things went down in Harlem. Harlem is like that hub. You know, you had the Apollo Theater, so you made your pit stops and all of that stuff. The story, how they got recruited to sing on Sesame Street, I thought that was dope. And how much of a writer he really was, and a producer, not only a vocalist, but a producer and writer. He was dope, and he wrote a lot of records for a lot of people too. Produced a lot of records for a lot of people. Contribute vocals. Even as Luther, he was still doing background vocals, ad Dibs helping out all these different people. I just thought that was amazing. But back to these jingles though, I happened to do my research. He did jingles for Kodak, NBC, KFC, Burger King, Juicy Fruit. I think I said Mountain Dew. If I didn't say Mountain Dew, he did something for Mountain Dew. And that went on from about 1977 to about the early 80s. You know, they didn't really, out of all the research I done, they didn't really specify when he actually stopped doing jingles. If Never Too Much came out in 81, that means he was still doing jingles, because the checks is phenomenal even back then. So you know the checks is crazy now. We know how it works with licensing. Just jingles, he was just, at one point in time, he was happy with just being a background singer and writing jingles to make money, not only to cut his lights on, but get his mama a better crib, a better place to stay, living out on his own, working in his craft. So as long as he was working in his craft, he was cool. Another thing I noticed, there was a story, and I don't want to give away too much, but I guess in a lot of interviews, he would talk about Roberta Flack. Now, obviously, he did a lot of background. He was the go-to guy. Like, it was certain people that just was like go-to guys from a behind-the-scenes standpoint. And me, I'm very fascinated with anything that goes on behind the scenes, because I'm a songwriter and a producer. I've wrote songs before for other people. I've wrote R&B. I've wrote different things. I never wrote a jingle before, but I know I can. I definitely want to rub some of that paper for sure. But long story short, he was gigging with Roberta Flack. Like I said, he was a go-to guy. And it's two different types of stories according to what's true and what's not true, who knows. According to Roberta Flack, she says that she kind of pushed him to the direction of being a solo artist and not being content with being a background vocalist. But the way Luther describes it was totally different. I don't know. He said it jokingly. I don't know if it's a thing they got between each other. Who would ever know? He would say Roberta Flack fired him, and that's what led him to really going hard with the solo thing. But who knows what the story is? But I thought it was pretty profound anyway. Who would have thought his biggest influences to make him want to sing was the Temptations and the Supremes? And then you can sprinkle a little bit of Otis Redding, and you sprinkle a little bit of Dionne Warwick, and you add these elements, and you got Luther Vandross. Who would have knew? And he was influenced by Aretha Franklin. How can I forget the Queen? Now, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that, because it's a lot of dope female vocalists. I can name a bunch of them. That's my favorite. I absolutely adore Layla Hathaway and Anita Baker and Sade. You know, we on man time. But anyway, from his perspective, he was talking about their voices, the way they performed, the way they made people feel, certain nuances about their voices and the uniqueness of them, and certain intricacies of what these wonderful artists and groups do. And I was like, who would have thought that? And then when you listen to his vocals and you think about it, and then you go back, once you watch the documentary, you know what I mean? Not to even stray from that. This is, everything goes with each other, trust me. And when you dig into this documentary and you hearing it from the people that know him best, it all kind of makes sense. The uniqueness of his voice, you know, of course he's Luther. There's only one Luther, and I don't think it'll ever be another. I mean, we get a few minutes, like Jaheim, no disrespect to Big Ruben. It's only one Luther Vandross, literally. And his resume is ridiculous. It speaks for itself, and I thought it was just mind-blowing. And obviously, everything he's done, his body of work, it's no wonder he was a legend. And in some ways, he really didn't get his just due the way he would put it. You know what I mean? And that makes me think about one of my next episodes of This Is Not a Podcast. We're going to talk about those things. This got a lot to do with it. So, about him being a dope songwriter, we all know he wrote for Aretha Franklin and a couple others, but before all of that, he wrote Brand New Day. You ever heard this song on The Wiz called Brand New Day? Now, he wrote it for the Broadway play The Wiz, but they also, as we know, if you watch the movie The Wiz, Diana Ross sings this song towards the end, and it's a really big number. So that was like a real big record. He was behind on a lot of big records that went gold and platinum even before he became Luther. So that right there is just an incredible feat. But let's get to these awards though. In the beginning, I mentioned 33 Grammy nominations, taking home 8 Grammys to be exact. 16 nominations with the Soul Train Awards, took home 4, including the Quincy Jones Award for Career Achievement, which is a prestigious award in 1999. 12 AMA nominations, taking home 9. Out of those 12 nominations, he took home 9 AMAs. Not only, obviously, we know he's got a star on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood. Not only that, he's in the National R&B Hall of Fame. The way things are, he should definitely be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. at some point in time because he is definitely well deserved. The man worked with David Bowie and made David Bowie change his whole style just for a split second. The disco group Chic, shouts out to Nile Rodgers, and he said this in the doc, you know, after hearing Luther Vandross, that's the only background vocalist he ever worked with on all those albums, and maybe even after that. He's like one of those inside go-to people because he does a lot of things. Phenomenal producer. He's responsible for a lot of production as well. He kind of reminds me in a way like kind of like a Barry White in a sense. Not to compare the two, but just knowing like these behind the scenes stories just make it that much more dope when you hear about the artist. With all that being said, with a phenomenal career, I was just thinking about, like, you know how we all talk about artists and we talk about all these classic albums or what are they best known for. And for me, I don't have a classic Luther Vandross album personally. I don't know how all y'all feel. For some of y'all old school Luther fans, let me know in the comments if you ever see this video. Let me know in the comments what's your favorite Luther Vandross album if you got one. Now, me, myself, I would prefer maybe a greatest hits album over just a full album straight through. Me personally, this is just my personal opinion. Don't get mad at me, but I really don't think he have a classic album that you can play straight through. But what he does have is a long list of a compilation of songs. That's what will sum up a Luther album. You would have to put all these songs and put them all on one project. And if I did, I figured out what it would be, what it would look like. And this is just my mock list, no particular order. But my favorite Luther songs, I can give you 10. I got a couple honorable mentions, but I'm gonna give you my 10 favorite Luther Vandross songs, period, made by Luther. No particular order. I'm gonna start off with Glow of Love. I count that as a Luther song. If you don't, that's your business, but I count it as a Luther song. That's a Luther Vandross song to me. Any Love, which is Luther Vandross' favorite song he ever sung, and I agree. That's one of my favorites. Obviously, if I did have to choose a number one Luther Vandross song, it's hard, but this would probably be in the contender if I did pick a number one, and that would be Superstar. Smoke that song. To me, that's his Billie Jean to me. Even though that's a Carpenter's original song, he figured out a way to make that song his. He did a lot of Dionne Warwick songs the same way and just turned. House Is Not a Home, Never Too Much. There's Nothing Better Than Love with Gregory Hines. Don't You Know That? Only for One Night. Bad Boy. I think that's 10. Another thing I forgot to mention, Rolling Stone recognized him as one of the top 200 greatest singers of all time. So that says a lot. And here's another one for me. I put him in the category as one of the most unique voices music has ever heard to me. And when I'm talking about vocalists, like, I think we talked about this in a live one time when we talking about the difference between singers and singers. Now, when we say singers, we talking about who got that extra touch in them. And Luther Vandross got both. He's like a professional. He's like a hybrid. He does both. Like Whitney Houston does both. Like, she can go church and she can be as polished, like clean. He's one of them. Definitely, he's a beast when it comes to the vocals, and he definitely knows what he's doing. It's Luther. You know what I mean? What can you say about Luther? I just had to, say something, show late great Luther Vandross. Luther the man. Like, I just for me, just learning a few new things that I already know. In so many ways, again, you could say this man was underrated. Maybe he didn't get his just due in a lot of ways, but then again, he did. He definitely served his purpose on this earth, and he definitely served his purpose in terms of music is concerned. He definitely did his thing. He did his big one. So that's one guy that I could say, even though, you're dealing with a lot of different things internally, he made people smile. He gave us countless hits, and in a way, he knew how to overcome adversity for the most part and turn a negative into a positive. And for that, that's what makes legends legends. That's what you call greatness. It's got to be in you. It's got to be on you. And it just so happens it's just oozing out his pores. It's one of them one-of-ones that we talk about, that we're going to talk about forever. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end this vlog right here. I know I probably said too much and got to clean this up, but rest in power to the late, great Luther Vandross. My thoughts and prayers go to his family and friends that knew him best, that was close to him. His legacy will definitely live on. It's only one Luther Vandross, y'all. And that's all I got for y'all tonight. And as always, keep God first, stay sucker free, and by all means get to the money. Peace and love, stay healthy, and I'm out this joint.
Love and tell, I don't know what you're waiting on. Sitting by the phone or looking at your smart TV. Your laptop or computer or whatever you use, just go over to YouTube.